he has 1 million.
So here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
Scott, just as far as bonding goes, and we do this at the council level, we're not legally allowed to bond stuff beyond its useful life. We buy police cars 3 to 5 years, but you can't bond it for 20 years because it's not going to be, you can't spend taxpayer money in the future like that. But if we buy a police building and 5 cars at the same time, we can average out, which is what you're trying to do with this. By having this baked in on a 20-year cost, much like HVAC equipment and some of the other things that are in the bonding, it's basically you're indebting us down the road for stuff that's going to be, we'll be making payments while we're replacing the stuff we're paying for. So from a fiscal responsibility point of view, I'm not arguing the value of the things that need to be done. My concern is how you're managing the finances moving forward. So we're not 6 to 8 years from now we need a $60 million bond because we've got to pay off the original bond. And now we got to buy new stuff.
And Mike, to your point, so the reality is we're asking to borrow $26 million. With the guys are going to get $6 million back from the state, and the reality is the state can reject a bunch of those pieces.
They have,
so we're actually going to spend $26 million with the thought we're going to save some money.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee. I mean, I know
that's
that
not,
we
that's
made
not
that could be a concern.
So I think people are commingling the previous referendum where there was funding from the state through a grant versus debt servicing. So the debt servicing, we've already been given promissory commitments for those funds.
Right,
The
but
grant
that's-
funding was
but the state
different.
budgets are 2-year cycles. So in 4 years, they can come up with new funding mechanisms to say, that's no longer feasible, we're pulling those funds.
Yeah, I
That's-
think
that's
they'd be
very
really hard pressed
possible.
to not fund what they committed to in writing through official process.
It's,
I get the fear factor and the if and the when and all that stuff, but again, I can debate that with you, but I can't tell the future anymore about that. I can tell you that, say that tomorrow the 40% funding in the state of New Jersey with revenue doesn't exist, and we might miss all of the 40%.
well,
I can, that's no.
my point clear was only simply this, is that I'm not gonna buy a car and use a 30-year mortgage to pay on my house. I'm not gonna run debt service that way.
Right.
And when you guys sit down and you mechanize how you're gonna spend the money and how you're gonna borrow them, whether you do the project, whether you get the debt service from the state, regardless of all that stuff, you have to look at these things individually and say,
So what I'm saying is,
what is this gonna cost us?
and the cost to do it this way is less than the cost to do whatever. And if I have to replace it again, which I will, right? Technology, I say all the time, Moore's law says it's 18 months. So we're constantly replacing technology. Almost all the technology that we own now has been purchased in the same way, because otherwise it wouldn't exist. Right? When I first started teaching,
Okay, but
let me finish. I started teaching in a technology class, and we were the place where you could get to technology. People couldn't afford it in their home. Now the technology is fast changing more quickly in your home than the schools. So I have a budget every year that's allowed to grow $1.2, $1.3 million. That does not include, that's status quo, and status quo doesn't cover the operational costs for the district. So I either don't have it, I find a grant for it, or we're told by the legislature that we've got to ask for it. So that's what we're doing. We're saying we think that this is important. There's not enough resource in the local budget.
that's not, you're
I
missing my
can't
point.
say, I
I'd
think
like
I
to
do,
explain
but
it so you understand.
I do understand.
I-
But it's irrelevant.
Let me
We can-
explain it
yeah.
so I understand. Okay, let me put it that. All right. Simply what I'm saying is on items that are 5-year, 7-year, 10-year,
I understand.
you should bundle and have a 10-year bond referendum. On buildings, structures, things that are 30 years, you should have on a 30-year cycle. Because what you're saying is true. If you buy rather than leasing it long-term, that's a cheaper way to go. But not if you keep exceeding the useful life and you have debt service beyond that has interest payments to it. Because if that starts to stack up, second, third, fourth generation, you're going to pay 2, 3, 4 times.
I think that happens in a lease purchase too, over 5 maybe not as
I'm
long
not
as
suggesting
term.
lease
Yeah.
purchase. I'm suggesting a bonding mechanism is skewed when you try to stick everything into a mega bond rather than breaking these things down into bonds for
So-
their actual useful
So
life.
to that end, right, and your point is valid, I'm not arguing with you or saying that that's not a fair position to take. We elected to put it in there for the reasons that we've elected to. But what I would suggest that if you're to use the nomenclature that's here is that you're concerned that there's a $26 million referendum and $1 million of it in that process, which is not all technology. Some of it's door locks, some of it's a wall at the South Valley School, some of it's more door systems and mechanisms. So it's not all $1 million worth of cash. Right. Well, that's different. That's another X. But all those kinds of things in the referendum, it's not all just one thing. So you can take that million and break it down. If that number of technology equipment that you're uncomfortable with is enough to scuttle all the other things, then that's a choice that people.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you can take segments of your 26 million, break it into smaller bond asks in correct years for the useful life.
Right.
So that as those bonds age out and you're going to buy that equipment again, then you've got a debt service that's baked into your budgets moving forward that you can recharge it, go out for bonding again, and you've already got the payment kind of built into the tax structure.
Sure. Well, that's something
But
that
if you're
bond
doing it the
council.
way you're doing it, and everything is front loaded to solve 5-year problems now with 20-year debt, in 15 years, after doing that twice, you're going to keep raising taxes because you're still paying for old stuff that's been thrown away. That's what I'm saying.
Is it even possible to do a $26 million project and have one bond cover literally one physical bond?
You can have multiple questions within the bond, and then afterwards the bond council or attorneys would go out and structure. I don't know if I've ever seen where they structured 20-year, 10-year on base access to the project, but it's something I can ask.
It might be a balance between, like you were saying, paying something off and then it's no longer working. You then want to go on to, you're not paying interest on that now that it's no longer working. So if you just want to do it, you might need to bond, you know, do stuff. So that might, you know, people.
I don't know if you have any more specifics to that, sir.
I've never seen that.
I've never seen it done, but it's not that we can't ask, and we haven't secured the bonds, right? So you don't secure the bond until after the referendum either
Bond
passes.
has nothing to do with the rebate we're getting from the state, they are advocates by that.
Yeah, that part's not part of the same. So we're only going to go out and bond for the cost. Yeah. Cameron, I think.
So-
I have to transfer to you.
Yeah.
So,
Let me start. I'm sorry, I noticed Cameron first. I'll go there, and then if I can go to you second.
first I want to thank you for all the hard work. I think you're a hardworking, conscientious person that really cares about kids. And I think that you're getting asked a lot of questions, and I think that a lot of the anxiety that people are feeling is really not towards you. You're kind of a living person.
Sure.
It's really towards the
It's part of the job.
No,
I signed on this 20 years ago. I get it.
It's really towards the board. At the end of the day, you work at the pleasure of the board, and you're responsible for the board. So and ultimately the decisions are on the board. So I want to make
Both.
sure.
They're both in all
Yeah, they
fairness,
are,
right?
but you're
We
advised of the
present
board.
what we think is the educational material. I mean, look, on a selfish level, yeah, it'd be great. Blame somebody else.
No.
But the reality is,
Question.
we present what we think was educationally viable to the board, and the board spent a lot of time, and they held my feet to the fire and to the experts in the room and said, it's not good enough, go back. It's not good enough,
That's
fine.
actually what I want to talk about a little bit is, one of the thing that I'm not comfortable with, and maybe I should be, but I'm trying to get comfortable with, is kind of how this whole process works. So I see this plan, this expensive $26 million plan, and I've been involved with build-outs, not such large build-outs like this, but build-outs of facilities, business decisions. The process has always been you have to create options for yourself. So here's the $26 million kind of best case scenario. We get a lot of money, do everything that we want to do. It's called the Sandra option. Okay? All right.
That's
But
my first
there
answer.
should always be another option too. And you've worked with one architect. So did you look at another option, which just looks at reconfiguring what you have, the cost of doing that? I know Bob didn't like that option. He's one architect. Did you talk to any other architects that talked about a second option, reconfiguring the facility, potentially, we've got a municipality has additional space, I understand, tens of thousands of square feet that you can lease out. And look at the cost of that. Because I'm assuming that is substantial. And then you do a comparison between the two.
Would they be small referendums when we move on to the next one, get another referendum?
No. The point would be that you've got the $26 million plan, but I mean you're essentially acting as fiduciary. I mean, you're playing with taxpayer money. And if I'm playing with taxpayer money, if I was in your position, I would be the responsible thing to do, and maybe you've done this, is to look at different alternatives so that you can come, because I see one alternative. I've only seen one.
That's right.
That's right. changed the standard alternative. So kind of the build it and they will come alternative.
So I'll say, and then Scott can add, as the Sandra representative here, that as Scott said, it wasn't the board's intent to go out for a $26 million project. It was to say, what is the least expensive way that we can take care of this? So for example, Mark's suggestion that we divide classrooms, we absolutely looked at that. Did we have Bob Garrison look at that? Yes, but no, the idea of splitting, no, but I'm just saying,
Bob
but what I'm saying is, someone's saying to me,
you ask somebody else to come up with
no, what I'm saying is this, let me just finish, Cameron. The idea of what would it take to split a classroom, to take a classroom that right now has 2 small groups, to turn a 25 capacity classroom to 2 small group instructional spaces that can hold 12. Any architect will tell you, you have to build a wall and you only have 1 HVAC unit, so you need to figure out your ventilation to split that space. You don't, 2 architects will give you the same answer. And electrical and everything else that goes with it. You don't need 2 architects to tell you that the space.
There's a third.
That's
Right.
true. I had classrooms, I went to school where they had a wall that was an accordion wall, they closed it, they opened it as they needed.
Yeah, and we could do that. And we looked at the cost of doing all that and the flexibility and potential, and does it solve today's problem, does it solve tomorrow's problem? You don't need 2 different architects to tell you that those spaces are landlocked, they can't build in.
You do need 2 different architects. Because what happens when you have one architect, that architect gets paid by the cost of the project, roughly about 10% of the cost of the project. So he's making $2 million plus on it. So if you go to a second architect and we say, well, we're looking at a more cost-effective plan, this is what we're looking at, and look at this, they're more likely, they're going to come up with another solution. They're not going to tell you.
This wasn't the first solution.
Right.
Every time we get questions from the community about, did you think about building on top of the buildings? Yes, we did. Did you think about what it would cost to occupy unused space in the municipality? Yes, we did. We are only presenting you after lots of different alternatives.
I'm not talking about conversation. I'm talking about
Pricing it out.
creating a competition
But
and having
that's so the mechanism.
because that's what people do.
But the mechanism in schools and municipalities is that you go out for RFP to hire an architect or an engineer or a council or whatever it is. You hire that person and then you task them as part of your hired employee to do the work that's there. And then the board has to assess them, did you provide us those alternatives? And what you're hearing is that this isn't the first, it's an iteration of 7 or 8 different plans. And if ultimately the board feels that the architect didn't provide the services, didn't do a good job, didn't provide what they asked and tasked him to do, then they do not hire and they go out for RFP and they find the next series of architects to interview and to hire. We don't do a competitive cycle or process where I don't think you need to do it.
The board's not expert architects.
No, they're not. That's why we hire them.
Just get 2 and just make a comparison.
It's different. You do that with like vendors once the project's clear.
Scott, the trend municipalities in fact actually bring up quite a bit about this. The trend now we do it at the council level is you get your proposal from and we have multiple engineers and planners, so there's alternates. I don't know why the board only has 1, because you're allowed to have 10 alternates if you want to. I don't even know if there's a limit. But what we do is if we get a package back, we go to one of the alternates and have them do a value engineer to review the first guy's work and say, do we really need to do all this? I'll give you an example of how the design can get out of hand. Not bad intention, but just wanting to just do the very, very best. Dawson Park, we redo the basketball courts and the tennis courts. The first proposal came in over $800,000 for essentially what we thought was an asphalt parking lot and basketball court. Digging into the plans, what the engineer had spec'd was something called tension concrete. So this is concrete with rods, stainless steel rods that are then put under tension. to keep it from spreading and cracking over time. It'll last 30 years, we were told. The asphalt that was out there lasts 25. We went asphalt, it was $300,000. So we saved, over $500,000, including the fee for design, including the bond costs and everything else, because we scrutinized whether we really needed to do it that way. We ended up with beautiful basketball court and beautiful tennis courts and walking path and everything that we wanted to get
Let
done.
me add or explain the process that we use, right? So again, we talked about we hire an architect, we task them to develop a plan, the board assembles that, and agrees, disagrees, asks them to go back, change. That plan then has to go to the Department of Ed with costs, right? So he's developing a cost. It's reviewed and approved by the department that it's within the guidelines of those costs. It's then goes to another layer and gets a final eligibility cost. And then once awarded, it has to go out for bid. And we're asking the public for a bond up to a certain amount. They may not exercise all the bonding capacity if we can, through our contractors, find a cheaper way and an equivalent alternative the way it's written. So we use that process to make sure that we're doing the most effective, and the relationship that we have with the architect is what creates some level of trust and understanding what the community
Let me
is.
follow up on
But it's
that.
not blind.
Let me follow up on that. First, let me apologize for failing to explain what I was talking about. I'm not talking about going through the secondary, the DOE or anybody else seeing that. If you've got a plan, an architect developed a plan, I'm sure all his numbers are based on the correct prevailing rate and cost of materials. What I'm saying is, in the case of Dawson Park, for example, we scrutinized that scope of work, and that's what drove the cost down. If the plan came to us for tension concrete and that was approved, and it went on the planning board as a capital improvement, they would look at that for what we were buying makes sense. What we did as a council is looked at it and scrutinized. Do we really want to get 5 more years for $500,000? Or do we just want to do asphalt? Let it wear out.
The board-
We
the
went
board did
through that. I'm a
Well-
former science teacher. Original plan was to upgrade all the science labs in the high school. I'm a former science teacher. But the Sandra Alberti plan said, no, let's not put that in there. Let's cut that out. So we did think about everything that was in there. We spent lots of time.
What I would ask you then is, did you guys do an inventory and engineering assessment on all your HVAC equipment? Do you need to replace everything that's listed? Or should it be done over time? Are you actually replacing out stuff that still has useful life? Or you're not?
We did it like, based on usable life, based on our warranties, based on what we were able to do. It doesn't mean the day the bond is passed, potentially, that we right away replace everything. We have the
The answer is-
bonding capacity.
The answer in part is yes, right? So because we have a long-standing relationship, we have a director of facilities and our architect and engineer that have a plan that says, these are in the last referendum as an example, that $60 million referendum, we replaced some of the HVAC and rooftop units and classroom units based on the age and lifespan of those units and what the standards exist. We didn't replace them all. We replaced the ones that were ready to replace because they were at end of useful life or beyond. In this referendum, we have the next tier, because we've done multiple roofs and multiple additions over time. The next tier of equipment is what we proposed. Not more, not less, but the things that are there. So, and those are based on the standards, and the board asked to see the standards, and they looked at them and said, what's the life cycle of this versus that? So I think the answer is yes, maybe in a different way that you or somebody else has done it, but we've done those things to kind of get in there. And I know this gentleman's been so patient.
John, first of all, we appreciate you being here, and we know you mentioned you had other meetings. Well, we'd like to know what kind of arguments were given against this referendum at other meetings, because sure, there's so many great questions here. I'm sure there were other great questions.
They're very similar, right? So up here front on the front table as well is a question and answer document that was born out of every single meeting that we've had and the kinds of questions that people said. So there's 39 here. I've got a list from the most recent meetings, another 5 or 6 that we'll add, but they're not dissimilar to what you've asked. Like there's not a question with the exception of could I split the bonding out 20 years, 10 years, 5 years within the same question. Every other question has been asked in some way, shape, or form. So there's nothing I'm surprised to hear. We may disagree on the answer, but except for that, they're pretty much all on
Is
here.
there any other points of view being made besides what we're saying?
Sure, tons.
I
So,
got one.
yeah, we have individuals on the Board of Education that have a different point of view and have voted as such in public meetings.
And I'm not saying anything that's new to it sounds like anybody in the room, but I mean, we've heard a lot about the Goldilocks principle and whether we want to make sure we're not doing something too small, too big, we want it to be just right. My biggest concern is we have no idea right now what's just right.
That's
Right?
even-
I'm talking on behalf of myself, right? Okay. I don't know what the problem is, and I think with a $26 million ask, we need to have a lot more certainty in terms of just the population study. Are there other alternatives? And I heard that there were 6 or 7 iterations about what a plan we should do. I'm sorry, but I never saw those. And I'm on the Finance and Operations Committee. It's always been this plan.
This has changed at least 3 times.
This
Since
plan
October.
of rejiggering the school system and moving kids from third up. There's been minor changes where we're going to the housing.
No,
But it's, can I finish?
Please.
But it's always been this framework of moving kids from the elementaries up to UES. It has never been anything other than that. I've never seen, now, let me finish. There's been conversation, yes. Has there ever been a cost out of other alternatives? Not that I've seen. Now,
So,
another
but that
this,
doesn't
may I
mean there
finish?
what? You
Another
can in a
vote
second,
on
Mark,
this.
but
We'll
to that point, there was.
May
and
I
there
finish,
is.
please?
Sure. But I just want to tell you there is, just because you didn't see it.
Let me finish. A no vote on this sends us back to the drawing board to first identify if there's a problem and then figure out what other solutions are. Because to me, my own personal perspective, this isn't it. Now, I also heard that we saved money, right, over the summer. I think it was $1.1 million saved money by the work that was done over the summer to reduce the cost of this. Because in May was when the board approved this for a November vote. Right, this was on the ballot, it's supposed to be on the ballot for November. Over the summer there was work done by the referendum committee, I'm not on it. And then later, I believe it was either September or October, it got pushed into December. I disagree that we saved money. In May, the project cost us $25.6. Now it's going to cost us $26.2. So where that $1.1 million or $1.2 million in savings is, I don't understand.
It's the state share. The
But-
total project cost didn't change, but the state share increased.
Right, because the project cost increased, right? The state share is a percentage.
There was,
But
So when
things
the
that were not
project cost
eligible-
goes up, the state
There
share.
were things that were not eligible in May that became eligible.
In any event, and then to address your question, sorry, I got some other things. Go ahead, actually.
I'd be happy to, I'm just letting you know, I'd be happy to talk to you about where that one was, because I worked through the summer.
so I understand that there's questions and debates.
What percentage have state or federal?
So the total cost of it, depending on whether you're above the line or below the line, could be up to 40%. When it all mathematically works it out, some parts of the project got 5, some got 10, some got 20. It averages out to 30+%.
Why wasn't there separate referendum for projects that be 8 and get those up?
So this is what we've done, right? So the board, so to Mr. Villanueva's point, the board did back last spring say, yeah, move this forward. As soon as we did, there was outcry and disagreement even within the board, including Mr. Villanueva, saying it's too much. And have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done that? So we tasked everybody to go back. And in this process, we reduced the overall request of what was in the project almost $1 million. And then we've got other funding that's still in the project, but the share portion of it is either now state or it's local. There was one aspect of when we went through the submission design where making a parking lot, that required us to do some changes in water runoff and things like that, which cost us more than what the original projection was. So there were some additional costs, but they were offset by other things, and money was moved. So an example of that is the middle school classrooms. We were able to get back into the 40% funding where initially we were not. So all of that is there. I mean, I can go line item detail and kind of go through that, but the reality is it's there. If I could, I'd love to give you guys the opportunity to see the rest of it, and then I'll stay as long as you need me.
I think it's fair. I think we just need to capstone the point that Cameron raised. I thought it was a phenomenal question, and then Mark just commented on, and that is really the essence of a viable alternative. Because I think that, and Sandra made a point a few minutes ago that I found to be shocking. She said, "This is the cheapest plan that we could come up with." You absolutely said that. there is not a person in this room that doesn't feel like if they actually applied themselves or came up with architect alternatives or invested time and effort, that the problems that you've articulated, some of which we've questioned and poked holes in, others of which we can take as a given, whatever those issues are, that there's not a cheaper solution than $26 million. And I think the community that is struggling in this room and elsewhere is this communication around this has been essentially advocating for this very big expenditure without presenting specifically in a detailed and scientific way what viable alternatives may exist that we may prefer to this expenditure.
So the process, right, of doing this is if you elected officials to be a part of that process to come up with a proposal. The board itself tasked me and the professionals to give them recommendations. We brought those recommendations back. They reviewed that either at committee level or at full board and said, yes, no, maybe so. And then ultimately and then at the end, you as a community member will have some role in terms of determining yes or no to question 1 or 2 or the whole thing in total. But the mechanism to develop it, although we've collected feedback from lots of people, isn't such that it's made by every individual. Because what I can tell you in the meetings that we've had, there are lots of individual opinions. There are lots of places where people think and say they can do it cheaper. There are people that have had the opportunity to do it cheaper before and weren't able to do it. What we're saying is that through the experience of our architect or engineer, my 20 years in the superintendency, we've made every effort to make this as cost-effective and efficient to meet the totality of our needs. And we've tried to look at every plausible opportunity, and this is what we came forward with as a proposal. You may like it, you may not like it. That's your choice on December 10th. And all we're here for, and all the other meetings, was to try to at least explain why we think this option is the best option for the school district moving forward. You may choose to build a house and build it this way, somebody else may choose to build it a different way. Somebody may think that you've overbuilt, somebody may think you underbuilt. You may build and think you've overbuilt or underbuilt. All of that is accurate, valid. I'm not going to say that those decisions can't be from everyone in the room that have a very different opinion. We're in a room where there seems to be a consensus of opinion, but I've been in other rooms where there's not. I've been in other rooms, including like the Evergreens, where people say, look, at the end, we're going to support this. I don't know what they'll do when they go on December 10th, but people have told me all kinds of things. So with that, can I please?